Hello and welcome to the show, Both Sides Now, the show that gets the story behind the songs. And I'm very, very glad today to be joined by the American singer-songwriter, Cathyrn Craig. Cathyrn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yes, thanks for coming in. So, we said you're an American. Obviously, you don't hail from these sunny climes.
No.
Tell us where you come from and what brought you to our lovely shores.
Well, I came from originally Virginia, and then because of music, traveled around America. I went to Colorado for a few years, California for a few years, and then located myself in Nashville, Tennessee.
Wow.
And I've been there for many years.
Wow.
And that's where I met my husband, Brian Willoughby. And Brian hails from Antrim. And so he always said he wanted to come home. He wanted to come home. And 22 years after we started dating, we got married and we bought a house in County Down.
Wow, how lovely. And you're beside the seaside, I believe.
We're right on the seaside.
Good
It's
for
a
you.
beautiful thing.
Tell me how an Antrim man ends up in Nashville, Tennessee.
Well, he was in a band called Straubs, and they had been on tour, and he came down to Nashville to meet with a couple of songwriters that he had been told about from some English friends he had. And he met this man, Michael Snow, and they wrote a song together, and Michael brought me in to sing the demo.
Wow.
And then that night we did a radio show on Radio Lightning in Nashville. And that was it.
The rest is history?
Well, in a way, it was a little more convoluted than that.
Sure.
But yes, we've known each other a long, long time.
It always amazes me how music, how it develops, how it grows, how it leaves you in situations, can take you all over the world, meet new friends, meet your husband. It is really a common sort of leveler for everybody, isn't it? And you told me there earlier, your music has taken you all over the world, Cathyrn, hasn't it?
It has. And in fact, when I met Brian, I was signed to a little label in Scotland called Gold Rush. And I was already touring a bit, small stuff, but in Spain and Italy and England, all the UK. I hadn't made it to Ireland yet. But then when Brian and I started working together, well, we just continued that. And he, of course, had been literally around the world with the various acts he'd been with.
Fantastic.
And so between us, we've seen just about everything, except recently we haven't seen any restaurants.
It's because with the COVID, the COVID, as we say here. Because we have a clip coming up of you here playing. Tell us where this is. This is in Holland,
This is in Holland, place that we love playing.
And what's this song you're singing? Very interesting. I'm getting Native American from this song.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a song about the Chickahominy tribe in Virginia, where I'm from.
I love the shakies and your
Thank
wind
you.
chimes
Yes.
and your dream catchers and all sorts. That looks like great fun to do, actually.
Well, it is fun to do. It's a kind of a heavy message, and there's sort of a chant, an Indian chant in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So it's a bit difficult vocally.
And do you find that you bring a lot of your own experiences and sort of ethnic sort of groups and stuff into the way that you write, your experiences, your environment around you?
I think as much as any writer. I have a few songs possibly that are based on nothing, but most of my songs are about an experience I had, or I experienced it through somebody else going through it, very close to me.
Yeah.
So this Akanoe that you were talking about, it's just the treatment of American Indians altogether has been really hard. And where I grew up, it was sort of second nature that Native Americans were not sort of as good as the rest of us, if you know what I mean. And of course, growing up and meeting people and going places taught me that that was really a bad attitude.
Yeah.
And so I wrote that song with a lot of respect.
Sure. It's funny you saying about, experiences that either happen to yourself or happen to people around you. I tend to do the same thing. I think it's amazing as artists how you feed on other people and emotions and atmospheres in rooms. You seem to be able to just pick it up, and somehow, you mightn't think of it consciously, it ends up in your song. It comes from somewhere. Do you notice that? Even maybe 20 years later, or
Yes.
you'll remember a pain that someone has went through, or an experience, and then it whittles its way and finds its way. And there you go, abracadabra, it's there, and you never meant it. Do you ever find that? It just comes like radio antenna and comes and ends up in your heart and then on the page.
Well, I find there's always a little groove inside of me that relates to these situations. So most of my songs are about common human experiences.
We love, we live, we die.
Everybody goes through these certain things.
That's right.
And they see it. I view things like the poles that used to be outside of barber shops. Yes. They go around and around, but they go nowhere.
Yes.
And that's how I view life, is that we're sort of standing in one place, and life is going around us like that barber pole. And so we experience every situation from every different possible angle. You were talking about as a child, you weren't that nice to your parents. Yes. You went through a period, and then you became a parent, and ultimately that child will become a parent.
Yes.
And so you get to see it from all sides.
Yeah, 360, isn't it? And there's great levelers to us all, and we all have to go through the same things.
Yes.
And what I find the power of songs is that someone will draw out of your song what they need at that time.
Yes.
And what the show is that someone might draw something from that song depending on their situation, but of course you might have written that song about something completely
yes.
different. And I find that's the power of the songwriter, because in truth you're the only person in this whole world that knows truly what that song is about.
And even at the end of this, I'll still be the only person. No,
you're only going to give a bit away, are you?
I'm completely open, too open. But yes, I think a lot of situations you think are personal only to you, but you find, as you were saying, that other people have felt or seen the same things.
The same thing, of course. There's nothing new under the sun, my old mum used to say.
Oh, no, she's right.
Yeah. So listen, as we're saying, this is about the songs. It's about the stories behind the songs. So Cathyrn, I'm going to ask you, what's the song and what's the story?
This song is about my Aunt Jen. It's called Genevieve. And let's see, Aunt Jen, she came into my life because she married my uncle. And I was about 7 years old when she came into our lives. And she walked into a room of people, and she just was the light. Right. Do you know the kind of people I'm talking about? Yeah. She was beautiful for one thing, but it wasn't really physical beauty as much as she had a presence about her. And I instantly loved her and felt that I had found a kindred spirit.
Okay.
And it turns out that she had been a pilot, one of the first lady pilots in my home state of Virginia.
Wow.
And she had at first been a debutante and a teenage beauty queen and all that, but she chose not to live that safe life, and she became a flyer. And she did fly all around the world. She tried to join the armed services, but she wasn't old enough. So she went to work instead privately for a businessman.
Wow.
And together they traveled all over the world.
So a real trailblazer in the day.
Oh, she was amazing. And in fact, there's a museum dedicated to her at Richmond Bird Field in Virginia. And I'm so proud of her. And she was always somebody that was calm, and yet assertive. She knew where she was going and who she was, and she didn't let other people's opinions stand in her way of anything.
What a great role model for a young girl to have.
Well, she was. My mother had died, and she was a huge influence on me. And as I get older, I realize exactly each year it's a little more. Oh, gosh, sure. That came from Aunt Jen.
Yeah.
And she met Brian, and she and Brian sort of flirted with each other, even though by that time Aunt Jen was in her 70s. But she never lost that ability to reach out and connect with you with her eyes.
So a completely self-assured, self-confident, self-made woman.
Yes. Lovely woman. She injured her neck, and she had a disability from it. And she was in excruciating pain. Nothing could stop the pain. They tried surgeries and glues and all sorts of things, anything that the medical profession could come up with. And so after 15 years of struggling, Aunt Jen took her own life.
Did she?
She did. And I completely understood right away. It didn't take me a long time to process. Of course, I wish she hadn't done it.
Yes.
But at the same time, she wanted to be in that airplane.
Well, do you know what? She lived and died by her own rules.
She did everything by her own rules. And I can tell you, in the little town I came from, there was a lot of jealousy toward her, because men were attracted to her like mud. You know,
yes.
They loved her.
Yes.
And she, however, was never a threat. And she would never disrespect another woman. And so I learned a lot of values from Aunt Jen.
She sounds absolutely incredible. I cannot wait to hear this song. So whenever you're ready, you take it away.
Thanks. The last time that I sang this by myself without Brian was at Aunt Jen's funeral.
No.
Yeah. Everywhere she goes, she caused a scene. A teenage beauty queen who could have had a safe life, a loving rich man's wife, but she could hear the call of the wind. She wanted to go higher and then write her name across the sky. Across the sky, and Genevieve would rather be flying on a merry-go-round of sunlight and clouds, smiling, caught in between this world and her dreams. Genevieve would rather be flying. She remembers New York city lights and hot Havana nights, the feel of young skin and passion, the taste of salty sand on a beach, the moon and all the stars in her reach. But she'd leave it all behind, 'cause Genevieve would rather be flying on a merry-go-round of sunlight and clouds, smiling, caught in between the world and her dreams. Genevieve would rather be flying. In the sleepy light of dawn, she hears all of our prayers and our awkward silences. If she could, she'd tell us, don't you cry, everything's alright. She can close her eyes and she's free once again across the mountains and trees, dancing in the sky, 'cause Genevieve would rather be flying on a merry-go-round of sunlight and clouds, smiling, caught in between this world at her feet, or letting go of all she's known. She'll turn around and spread her wings, 'cause Genevieve would rather be flying, 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 flying. Genevieve would rather be flying. Thank you.
That was fantastic. I wanted to sing along with you there.
You should have.
Only I knew the mics would pick it up and we'd get told off. But I really did want to belt that out for you. That's fantastic. And I heard you doing that, obviously, as we were doing sound check. But what is fantastic is once you told the story behind that, that song just grew in my eyes. Once you know what it's about, once you know what the story that you've told me, it just came alive, doesn't it? For me, anyway.
Thank you.
That was really, really lovely.
I love you too.
I love you too. Thank you so much, Cathyrn, for coming in today. It's been an absolute pleasure. The song's about women. It's about great women. It's about strong women. And by God, you're all of those.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much. So, folks, join us next time on Both Sides Now, where we'll get yet another fabulous woman in to tell her story. See you later.
Hello, my little friend. Take it all away.